There was all kinds of jealousies because people were not living really well. He said, "How did you afford that coat? How did you afford? You stole from the company." And my father said, "I did not steal from the company. I would never do that." And so he said it one more time, and my father hit my uncle because my father was as honest as could be.
Welcome to the Wine Centric Show, and wow, do I have a special episode for you. When you talk Titans, you talk about Mount Olympus. These gentlemen are on there. This is royalty of American family winemaking. These are the Mondavis, gentlemen and ladies. This is Mr. Tim Mondavi of Continuum and his son, Carlo Mondavi of RAEN out there on the Sonoma coast. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you very much, Matthew. It's wonderful to be with you, and thank you for spreading the gospel. We love that and appreciate your advocacy for the good life.
Absolutely. Carlo, welcome. You're joining us from the Sonoma coast as well.
Yeah, thank you, Matthew. Yeah, it's a harvest. Day one was yesterday, and day two is tomorrow. So we're deep in it right now. But
I mean, that's dedication. Joining us during harvest, I truly appreciate that. And yes, I am an advocate for both. And I just want to tell everybody the impetus for having this conversation and having both of you together, which I persisted about, was because as you might know and you might recognize, I am in this RAEN Chateau property here in Pittsboro, North Carolina, called the Farrington House. It is a historic property, and both of your wineries are doing a very special dinner here on September 25th. So I want to just put a little plug in for that because this will be coming out 8 days before that dinner. The two of your wineries are doing a dinner, a 5-course dinner, 8 wines, with Chef Paul Gagne doing this beautiful RAEN Chateau cuisine that he does, and two of your soldiers, your right hands, are going to be here talking about the wines and guiding people through it. So for all of you out there, go get your tickets now. You just go on to Google Farrington Village Wine Events, Farrington Village Wine Events. It's on the 25th of September, RAEN and Continuum together at the Farrington House. Thank you for allowing me. I had to get that out of the way.
Yeah,
that's going to be special.
Glad you did, Matthew.
I have to jump off here with this question that has been gnawing at me ever since I started my wine education. One of the first things you hear about when you learn about California wine is the famous fight that took place in front of Charles Krug Winery between Tim, your father, Carlo, your grandfather, and Tim, your uncle, Peter. Were you there? Do you have any memories of it?
Oh, I was definitely at Charles Krug, but I was not privy to the fight. That's for sure. But it is perhaps an expression of how difficult things were in the wine industry post-prohibition and repeal. And so everything was difficult. No one was making money in any way.
Yeah.
And so jealousies tend to come up when things of that nature take place. Basically, my father was a very active guy, a lot of energy, very sharp. He was the third of his family. My grandparents, Rosa and Cesare, had 4 children, 2 girls and then 2 boys. My father was the elder boy, and always very outgoing, very much like my grandmother. Going, high energy. My grandfather was quieter. He was a visionary for the business. He was the entrepreneur, but he did so in a fairly quiet way. My father and my grandmother were very similar, very good energy, very social. And when my grandfather Cesare was around, he was the stabilizer. He was the one that was able to define the direction, and everybody would lockstep follow that. After he died, there were many things that evolved. My father, always wanting to excel, was kind of pushing the edge. He went to Europe in 1962 for the first time and saw firsthand some of the great growths of Bordeaux, of Burgundy, of the Rheingau, the Moselle. He saw the best, saw the worst, and he was very intrigued and came back wanting to continue to pursue nothing but the best. My uncle was much more conservative. And so there was a natural tension about how fast do you go, how slow do you go. My father's speed and enthusiasm and intellect brought him very far, and many people know him because he is was so charismatic and helped bring the entire industry behind him towards ever better wine. He helped bring Napa Valley from obscurity into, some would say, what it is today. But my uncle was calmer, quieter, more restrained. My father also had been invited by John F. Kennedy to go to the White House. President Kennedy hosting the president of Italy. So he wanted to have immigrants from Italy that had done well in the land of opportunity. And so he was all set to go, but it's cold back there. My mom didn't have a coat. And so my father found a mink coat that was on sale, had been discounted. He bought it over time. And my uncle, there was all kinds of jealousies because people were not living really well. He said, "How did you afford that coat? How did you stole from the company?" And my father said, "I did not steal from the company. I would never do that." And so he said it one more time, and my father hit my uncle because my father was as honest as could be. Everybody respected him for that. And so not long thereafter, my father was put on leave, and then he left without an opportunity to come back. My brother was not allowed to work there at Charles Krug. And so my father said, "Okay, well, that kind of breaks the camel's back. I'm going to move on and start Robert Mondavi Winery," which he did.
And one thing I want to add is that I was very fortunate to be able to spend a lot of time with my grandfather and my great uncle and see how close they were. So even though they had this rift and maybe about a decade of challenges that remained afterwards. Anytime you start a new business, Robert Mondavi was very difficult. It was all hands on deck type of thing. And challenging time, new business, all those things were tough on my family. But that after kind of getting to the point of tipping point for Robert Mondavi back, I guess that would be in the 70s, late 70s, maybe early 80s, they began to rekindle a relationship. And some of my great memories were watching the two of them interact, and just, they were such sweet businessmen, winemakers, entrepreneurs, very sweet people. And they had a deep respect and love for each other. But even though this story became kind of legendary just because it was a split that led to a bigger rift, that led to a separation, that led to, and I just say the same thing for my family, that the things that have set us back, the darkest and hardest of times, have led to the best, whether it was prohibition, my grandfather being asked to leave Charles Krug and begin Robert Mondavi, or in 2004 when essentially we had an unwanted sale of our business, and my father and my grandfather were able to begin Continuum. Every time we've been able to level up. So from the darkest of days have come beautiful things. It's just tough at that moment, but it was beautiful seeing their relationship.
Yeah, Carlo brought out a very important point. At the end of their times, they had mended the fences. Each had their own personality, each had their own area, and each contributed tremendously to the industry.
You know, where I am right now, we talked about the Farrington House and this area of North Carolina. I don't know if you've been, but the Triangle area of North Carolina is, according to Forbes magazine, one of the top places in the country to move to. We have Apple coming, we have Amazon coming, all of these giant tech people, much like Napa kind of came up in the world and became this modern winemaking power. North Carolina is at the precipice of that. And the person who can help you if you want to move here, or if you're looking to move a house or whatever, her name is Heather Donovan. She is the realtor of choice of the Wine Centric show. She is a wonderful person. She is a maverick. She is a pioneer. She has a tightness of realty. And she helps you make it all easy for everything. So if you're looking for a home in North Carolina, in the Triangle area, Raleigh, Durham, Morrisville, Chapel Hill, go to heatherdhomes.com. Check out Heather Donovan. That's heatherdhomes.com. Go to heatherdhomes.com and you will find a fantastic house and have an amazing experience. Okay. A couple of takeaways from that story. One, I believe I have the new name for the next iteration of a Mondavi winery, whenever that may be and wherever that may be. Whatever the Latin word for resilience is, I think that should be the next name for the next Mondavi wine.
Continuum.
Just a thought. I could put that in your head, okay? And
I love that idea, Matthew.
if you do it, just give me some credit in a footnote. That's all.
Okay, sure.
Okay. The last thing I'll take away from that story about your uncle and your father, and I have two sons. They are young boys. And if they get into a fight, they will never admit who threw the first punch. So I applaud you and your father for at least admitting who threw the first punch and for telling us the story about the mink coat. Because to us in the wine world, the sommelier community, we always think, it was over innovation versus tradition. And one wanted to push things forward and one wanted to keep things traditional. And
well,
I'm sure that was part of it.
That is the most important part of it. The most important part of it was, three phases. One is just very difficult times. Two, different temperaments. My father always wanted to progress and was willing to invest in new things, was willing to try new things. And my uncle was more conservative and was quite reticent. So there's tension there. Difficult times in the marketplace added to that. And then seeing how little everybody was making and taking home. I mean, people were struggling to put bread on the plate type of thing. And so my father buys this mink coat for my mom, and he had his honor impugned, and he said, I won't allow that. And so who threw the first punch? Is it verbal? The verbal punches are pretty powerful too.
The other thing that, I think is important, and you said it, but people that might be watching or listening to this are thinking, it's the Napa Valley. Of course they would have been invited to the president to, show their wine. Well, that was not the case in the 1960s. As you said, you were struggling coming out of 35 plus years or more than that after Prohibition, where nobody really knew about Napa wine. This was before Napa wine was on the world stage.
Oh, absolutely. You're absolutely right. I was lucky enough as a young boy, 15, 16 years old, to go skiing up at Heavenly Valley Ski Resort in Lake Tahoe. So all the people would be from the Bay Area that would be skiing there. And so we think of Napa Valley as an extension, from Continuum here, we look onto the buildings in San Francisco. That's how close we are. But up at, we'd be on a chair saying, hi, how are you? Nice snow. Where are you from? I'd say Napa Valley. And they say, they scratch their heads. I say, oh yeah, that's right. Isn't that where the insane asylum is? I say, yep. Napa State Hospital is there. But nobody knew Napa for wine or culinary when I was a little boy. And so all of this is happened within my lifetime. So, and part of it is people have to remember that it is a resurgence. California wine history goes back to the Spanish missionaries that first planted grapes in California in the 1700s. And coincidentally, the church spread grapes to Chile and Australia around that same time, the 1700s. But it went nowhere until the German immigrants came in after the gold rush. So the San Francisco 49ers, San Francisco went from 2,000 people to 20,000 people overnight because of the gold rush. And in the wake of the gold rush, people came into Napa Valley. People like Charles Krug, 1861, Jacob Schramm, 1862, Behringer Brothers, 1879. All of this brought fame to Napa Valley such that there were 121 wineries in Napa Valley by 1919. Prior to that time, the reputation for Napa Valley wines was on a par with the greatest wine regions of the world. But then Prohibition hit in 1919, and for 14 years, Prohibition made it impossible or illegal to formally produce wine, with the exception of none other than the church. The church needed wines for the sacraments. And so you could make sacramental wine. And then by extension, each head of household was allowed to produce 4 barrels worth of wine a year. And I know this because that's what got my family into the wine business. My grandfather, being the entrepreneur that he was able to see that as an opportunity and come to California starting in 1919. So he could then make home wine for all of his friends.
And he came from Minnesota to the Napa Valley. So to your point, there must have been
Yes.
something going on that they knew, oh, I'll come from Minnesota, which how he got to Minnesota from Italy, I'll never know, but we can save that story for another
Okay,
day.
very good.
Thank you again for sharing that. And Carlo, thank you. You've probably heard the story, I mean, countless times. So I appreciate you for indulging me in that.
It's
But
been a while.
great segue here because you talk about brothers. You work very closely with your brother Dante, who, by the way, I guess I'm guessing he doesn't like to be camera facing.
Dante is a bit shyer. He's also a
Okay.
father of 2 beautiful girls and a third on the way,
Oh
baby boy
wow.
on the way. So he's in full fatherhood. So when he's not in the cellar, in the vineyards, or out at doing tastings, he tends to be a homebody for sure. Yeah.
So let's sort of reverse time here, and we'll talk about Continuum and the genesis of that. But let's start with you, Carlo. I know your grandfather made a little bit of Pinot Noir, but you sort of broke ranks and chose a different place and a different grape. And how the idea for RAEN come about?
So I inherited my deep love of Pinot Noir from my father. Um,
Mm.
he, my father, actually, everything at Continuum is kind of Burgundian inspired. When you look at the appellations of Napa Valley and the shape and kind of size of Napa Valley, it really looks and feels a bit more Burgundian if you go to Burgundy, and how the appellations and like Vosne Romani and Clos du Vougeot and all the different villages kind of line up. Even though um, Napa Valley is really a Cabernet kind of a Bordeaux varietal kind of climate. My father really gravitated early on to Pinot Noir and Burgundy, was visiting Burgundy many times, once a year, became friends with Henri Jaillet, Gerard Potel, which was like the generation before Claude Laflève and Aubert de Valenne and Jacques Cesse, etc. And so when we sold Robert Mondavi back in 2004, my father was kind of put in this position of how do we take everything that we've done and elevate it to the next level. And for us, my grandfather, my father, my aunt, it was focus. And so focusing on a single site at the very highest level, which led to Continuum, and I'll let my father talk about that more. We stopped making anything but that one wine. And I'd gone to college in France, worked in Burgundy. It kind of coincided with the true Sonoma coast. So out on the edge of where you can achieve set and ripen fruit, this very cold area. I began tasting and seeing Pinot Noir wines that were just absolutely mind-blowingly exceptional. And many of our neighbors, and that really drew me, and I just kept digging. I grew up surfing out there. And so Dante and I, we searched for about a decade before we began RAEN. But in 2013, we began focusing on what we consider to be California Grand Cru sites. So we have 4 Pinot Noir bottlings and 2 now Chardonnay bottlings. But we are incredibly focused out there on that coast, and it's been a lot of fun. So I remember in 2013 standing outside of the cellar, because that's the only place I could get reception, calling my father and getting advice from him on what I'm seeing, what I'm tasting, like left road, right road, which way should we go? And all the little decisions that you make that lead to a final wine. I was very fortunate that I got to have this incredible consultant in my father, who, if you taste the Pinot Noirs he made in the 60s, well, in the 70s and 80s right now, they are tasting incredibly well. They've aged incredibly beautifully. It's a lot of fun to be able to taste those wines with my father, be inspired by them. We were making Pinot Noir back in the 40s. I have some 19, what is it? Well, early 60s, 63 Charles Krug Pinot Noir bottles, which is kind of fun.
Really?
Yeah. And some bottles that say Burgundy back when we did, my grandfather was the first one to say, we're not Burgundy, we're California.
Right.
Very proud of it. And he put, Napa Valley, Pinot Noir, Napa Valley Cabernet, back in when he began Robert Mondavi in 66.
Years ago, I talked with Mike Gergich, who was the second winemaker that my father asked. And years afterwards, I was talking with Mike, and he said, Tim, everybody compliments your father for being the first to put in a brand new winery and stainless steel tanks, and they talk about French oak barrels. But, one thing nobody talks about is the fact that he was the first one to only label his wines varietal names. Prior to that time, it was Chablis or Burgundy or RAEN or whatever
Champagne.
it might be, or Champagne from
Thank you, Corbel.
Yes, and so he said, it's a big deal because it takes us one step closer to the vineyard, and that was a very important step. And then we continued that upward trajectory. So that's important.
While Carlo was telling me about that, though, I couldn't help but think, Tim, because you have a similar story, and I know how your family is really, it's about site, and really finding the best site for grape growing. And not only grape growing, but what you guys have emphasized, this idea of wine growing, the combination of grape growing and making wine
Sure,
together,
absolutely.
growing wines that are made for grapes. You liked Pinot Noir, yet when you started Continuum, you had a choice. You had somewhat of a blank canvas, I imagine. Why did you choose to make a Bordeaux styled wine as opposed to go out and seek Pinot Noir at that point?
Well, I think that Carlo referred to it a little bit earlier, and that is that having grown up, born and raised in Napa Valley at Charles Krug Winery, our family was identified, yes, with California wine, but with Napa Valley wine. Napa
Yeah.
Valley was the lead item in wine in America. And so even though I did love Burgundy, I love Pinot Noir, and in fact, Robert Mondavi Winery made more Pinot Noir than Oregon did way back when. It was also something that we focused on. We did a lot of research, because if you think back, much of the winemaking was in the wake of Prohibition. There was red wine making. You ferment it at 75 degrees, you genuflect and say amen and do it, because that's what Davis says. White wine, you ferment at 55 degrees, you genuflect, say amen and do it. There was very simple guidelines for winemaking, and everything took the form of a broader, big red wine.
Right.
And Pinot Noir just does not do well in that. So we began to separate out how do Burgundy make wine? How does Bordeaux make wine? And they're very different. And so we began to do what we saw the best of Burgundy doing: open top oak fermenters, longer maceration, but cooler sites, lower yields. Pinot Noir shows the importance of site better than anything. It is very finicky. Cabernet Sauvignon is on the other side of that spectrum. Cabernet Sauvignon is a variety that does extremely well in very different soil types, from shy to vigorous, different climatic environments. And as a result, it's one of the most popular, and it's also known in the marketplace.
I want to
But
pause there for a second, Tim, just because I think that's really important that you establish that, because that brings into context what you were talking about before about how, things were just bottled under a hardy red, or, the Gallo family
right,
would call it a Burgundy, right? And then you establish this appellation system. And for those thinking about, and I had this question for you, because appellation, why we established this is because fruit from Calistoga tastes different than fruit from Rutherford, and fruit from on the
sure.
Sonoma coast tastes different than a Pinot Noir and fruit that you would drink in the or try in the Russian River Valley. So you're doing not only site specific but area specific, and creating value propositions and things that you're creating guidelines for not only winemakers and wineries, but for people to see a quality level on the label.
Yeah.
And I want people to understand that, because I had this question. We had Maya Dalla Valle on a couple of weeks ago, and we were talking about the price of Cabernet and stuff like that. And Carlo, I see you got your map out. What do
Well,
you
no,
got there?
this is an old case from my grandfather's cellar.
Okay.
That has Mondavi Vineyard champagne. This is from 19. I don't know if you can read it properly.
Yeah,
1962 here.
that's so
So
cool.
back in the day, this is at Charles Krug. I don't know, and I actually have some of these bottles.
Well,
Interestingly,
that's from
but
Charles Krug. It was bottled at
Charles Krug.
Charles
This isn't
Krug.
Robert
Yeah.
Mondavi. This is before Robert
Oh,
Mondavi
yeah.
at Krug. But it's funny because it says just what Dad was saying.
Yeah. There's been a huge maturation of the industry in my lifetime. Huge,
Mhm.
huge changes.
And I guess what I'm asking about, do you think that consumers today, and this goes to both of you, right? Because Carlo, you're putting very specific sites, what you called the Grand Cru of California, meaning this is the places that are growing the best Pinot Noir in the state, maybe in the world, arguably. You're up in Pritchard Hill and you're growing some of the best Cabernet and Cabernet Franc and Petit Verdot in the world. Is that message getting through to most consumers, or is it only the top consumers that are understanding this idea of place? And for most people, could you just say, "Oh yeah, this is from California," and they're like, "Oh yeah, it's good."
Well,
I'm
you have,
wondering what your guys' take on this being, your
yeah.
history and
Oh,
experience
sure.
in the wine world.
Oh, sure. You always have to recognize what is the beginning, what leads, what trails, and we as wine growers need to take the leadership role of identifying the sites that merit it. As the industry has matured over, three generations now, Carla's the fourth generation in my family. The evolution of the industry has evolved considerably, where people are willing to pay for excellence. And that wasn't the case. They weren't able to pay for the differences, and there was no real incentive to seek those things out. Now, I would say that appellations are a statement of character potential,
Hmm.
not realization. It's a statement of character potential. The
Well
people
said.
behind it are the ones responsible for the quality, and the vintage is talks about the nuance of that year. So the personality of that year. So I think that appellations are important, but it's up to the winemakers to capture that, which is what we have done in the appellation system. And then bit by bit, people are learning about that. They are learning that appellations are a statement of character potential. It's easier to use areas that have been doing this longer, Bordeaux. We are developing that here. But the soil differences are only now becoming important to people. I have a huge advantage in that I was responsible for Robert Mondavi Wines for 30 years, co-winemaker at Opus. But now I've been up here at Continuum on the highest average elevation vineyard on Pritchard Hill. The soils are completely different. One of the things that I believed, going back to your point about what comes first, the chicken or the egg, um, everybody knows that Napa Valley focuses on Cabernet Sauvignon. And everybody knows that Bordeaux is all Cabernet Sauvignon. Well, it's not.
Right.
Bordeaux writ large is 80% Merlot, with the balance being Cabernet Sauvignon, Cabernet Franc, tiny bits of Malbec and Petit Verdot. But the Médoc is dominated by Cabernet Sauvignon. Pomerol and Saint-Emilion are dominated by Merlot with Cabernet Franc particularly Cheval Blanc, some of the Saint-Emilion producers. Cabernet Franc is a very important variety. And so I think that we will begin to realize that just as Saint-Emilion is different, the hillsides of Napa Valley are different from the valley floor, even though the identity of Napa Valley is by virtue of the valley floor producing 95% of the wines of Napa Valley. The hillsides produce a very small amount.
Right.
Uh,
Can
And
we just unpack that really quickly? Would I be correct then for explaining it to somebody who might be new to this, to simply say the valley floor is going to give you plush, more ripe fruit versus the hillsides are going to give you a little bit more austere, age-worthy, tension-driven wines and fruit?
well, I think that that's fairly accurate if you are speaking about Cabernet Sauvignon alone.
Mm-hmm.
However, I have, because of that, because Hillside Cabernet does, I think, appropriately have a recognition of being a more structured wine, lower yield, um, more concentration, very age worthy. But I think the Cabernet Franc and Merlot tend to provide more elegance and more finesse. And so that is the reason our goal is to have Continuum be recognized as a first growth of the world, one of among the very, very best of the world for its elegance, for its complexity, its nuance, its approachability when young, and its ageability over time. So with Cabernet Franc and Merlot, and the way we are caring for our vineyards now, which is different from what I did when I first came up here 20 years ago, or nearly that, we have learned how to optimize this site because site-specific farming is always what it's all about. So we have to care for it differently, and we are. And as a result, we not only care for it differently in the vineyard, block by block, but we vinify each of our individual blocks that have their own personality according to their personality as well. So different
yeah,
maceration types, temperatures, by variety, by block. It's very precise now as to what we are doing.
I also really quickly, sorry, Matthew, I just want to tie into that question that you had asked earlier that my father went into incredible detail on, which I love. Is California wine, do you think California wines are being recognized kind of in the company of the best wines of the world? And is that actually sinking in? And I think,
but just let me clarify. It was
please.
more so to talking about, are people recognizing the site specific, the appellation, and the quality of those versus the overall general idea of California wine?
When you dive into the meat and potatoes of that, I think that there's the people that really seek finer foods and finer wine, and they are really getting into the granularity of where does this come from? What does that mean? And they're starting to recognize the parts of Napa Valley or the parts of the Sonoma coast, these appellations within larger appellations that they really love, like Sonoma, down to Sonoma coast, down to Fort Ross Seaview and Freestone Occidental, and these really beautiful little villages. Or for my father and my family with Napa Valley, with where we were at Oakville, but now up on what we call Sage Mountain Vineyard, people know as Pritchard Hill. I think people do follow that. Collectors do, but it also ties down to that dream. My grandfather and my father helped realize this dream was that. And he was called crazy, is that he felt that we had the soil, the climate, the know-how to make wines that could sit in the company of the best wines of the world. At the time, we needed to invest in the vineyards and to kind of the winemaking and all of that. And but when he went out into the market back then, people thought he was crazy. Everyone that heard his dream thought he was crazy at the time. And that was when he really had to start blinding people on his wines and comparing his wines alongside the Grand Crus of Bordeaux and Burgundy, or the first gross of Bordeaux and the Grand Crus of Burgundy. And that took quite a bit of time. And then I think the world realized, hey, you can make great wine that can sit in the company of the best of wines of the world. There are Grand Cru vineyards in California, or California Grand Cru level vineyards that can sit in the company of the best wines of the world. And we've continued to refine that. I think that question we're seeing it now. People really seek these areas, these villages, these microclimates, and then within the microclimates, I think my father nailed that on that. You can have a great logical formation with incredible microclimate and exposure and all the things that make great wine exceptional, but you also need the team and the vision behind that. And those things, we see it in Burgundy. I think is the most transparent. You'll have a Grand Cru village where a few producers really shine, but the other producers are not making wine as compelling, and that comes down to how they treat the site, how they're farming it, and there are little microcosms within the sub appellations. If you're talking about any of the smaller
Denis versus Geoffroy Chambertin, and even within those, the individual sites for sure.
Yeah, like La Trissière Chambertin, or Clos Saint Jacques. Like when you get into Geoffroy, there's like Clos Saint Jacques a great one because it's a premier cru that oftentimes people say this is like if you have Rousseau Clos Saint Jacques, that's like, is that really premier cru? Because it kind of feels Grand Cru. And so you see these producers taking premier cru and making what feels Grand Cru. And the team behind the vision behind the farming, the team behind the vision of that site and that wine are incredibly important. Grand Cru is nothing without a great vision.
Terroir is not just the soil, the sun exposure, how you trellis. It's also about the know-how of the people making the wine in that sense. And the Burgundians, they have a little bit of a head start on you, about just a little over 1,000 years since the Cistercian monks. So they know that spot, but with technology, we're getting there faster. Tim, I'm glad you explained the Cabernet Franc, because this whole time I was thinking it was just the father-son complex, because Cabernet Franc is the father to Cabernet Sauvignon. And I thought you were making a point of like, this is why we're sticking into Cabernet Franc. But thank you for explaining that. And by the way,
also it showed my father's love of Burgundy. I feel like Cabernet Franc is the Burgundian lovers. And for me,
Cabernet
that's interesting.
Our favorite. Yeah, we love it so much. So it's
yeah. Carlo, we're clipping that for the Instagrammables. Cabernet Franc is the Burgundian lovers Cabernet. I love that.
Yeah, it's an interesting way of saying it, Carlo.
Yeah, I mean, it's
very good.
It's true with me, and I know with my father. Clearly, we have a thing for it.
And my daughter knew that I had a love of Cabernet Franc, which is what I wanted. I wanted to differentiate. When I began Continuum, I wanted to differentiate from Opus One and also Robert Mondavi Reserve, which I was very much involved in, both of them. And my love of Cabernet Franc said, this is how we're going to do it. But then I didn't realize how wonderful it was up here. But my daughter Chiara that's our label. It is a shadow painting of a Cabernet Franc vine that I planted in Tocolon about 45 years ago now.
That's really cool. And also Chiara, she's the one behind, to bring it full circle, to make a great Sauvignon Blanc from that site as well.
Absolutely, she is.
Like your father did years ago with introducing Fumé Blanc to the American public, so.
And this is it's a very bright, vibrant wine. And yesterday was her first day of harvest. So she is very busy and very focused on it. Centium is unique in that it is grown on extremely old vines, planted in the 1940s and the 1960s. So that is even the 40s or even older than I am. That's quite rare, especially for a Sauvignon Blanc vine. But she was able to find them and nurture them along, and the wines themselves are stunning, absolutely stunning.
That's very cool.
She's also kind of this magically talented wine grower, learning from my father, and I've been in the cellar with her my whole life. But the painting behind my father is a Chiara painting. The label for Continuum is one of her paintings of a Cabernet Franc vine, as my father was saying. This little arrowhead up here, which is also one of the collections she did for the arrowhead that's on the RAEN label. And then on top of that, she did the Centium label, but she's this incredibly talented artist. And my father, I think my grandfather has the quote of saying, making good wine is a skill, fine wine an art. And so she's got this dual art kind of, and we all love art. She's got this dual art side where she's a beautiful painter. On top of that, an incredible winemaker. And she also has traveled the world, going to Bordeaux, working at Chateau Palmer with Thomas Deroux. and then working in Burgundy with Meo Camazet, Jean-Nicolas there in Von Romani. So she's also really
also
dove.
Trot Noir in Trot Noir with the Moex family,
That's right.
with Christian Moex.
Yeah.
Trot Noir, but also throughout all of the Jean-Pierre Moex vineyards, Petrus, all of that.
And
you
then
Grand Cru winemaking families, it's like that trainee program. You just send your kids all over the world. They send them here, you send them there. What a great experience.
honestly, the
Well-
best will learn more from if you come and intern with my father or intern, a great domain. I always get these questions because of the movement I began with Monarch to get rid of chemicals in agriculture and all that. I get these questions online. I'm like at university being taught how to use this chemical that I'm saying don't use. And so they say, where should I be going? What should I be doing? How do I learn? And for me, if you really want to make exceptional wines and Grand Cru level wines, nothing is better than an internship. You'll learn more in a harvest than you might in terms of informing what vision you might have for wine. Sure, the fundamentals of science and the biology and all that, you absolutely go to school for those things. But on the artistic expression of wine, you'll never learn more than doing a harvest with a domain that has heart and soul.
Yeah,
really.
Carlo did an internship at Domaine Dujac. And it's interesting to know that Jeremy Sess did an internship at Robert Mondavi Winery years before.
Yeah.
And he happened to meet Chiara's best friend, whose father asked me if Diana could work at Robert Mondavi because we had more of an international connection. And so she came, and now Jeremy and Diana are Jeremy and Diana Sess, and they have two sons. And Chiara is Chiara's the godmother for one of them.
Young Blaze.
Yeah. So it's a very close knit wine community.
Yeah.
And I believe, because Jeremy was on the show way back, almost like 9 months ago, I believe him and your grandfather, his dad and your father, Tim, started the winery in the same year. Wasn't it 66?
Well, Robert Mondavi was in 66. I don't know when Jacques Sess started Domaine Dujac, but it could have been around the same time.
69 was, I think.
Maybe 69 was his first vintage and he bought it, but there's some synergy there.
I think they had some.
That's right.
At the beginning of Dujac.
Yeah, he didn't bottle the first wines that he had, I don't think.
By the way, back to the original story that we spent a lot of time with, Aldo Conterno, I believe, worked in Napa. I'm not sure if he worked with your father or your uncle, but then he went back and had a famous disagreement with his brother that set the world of Barolo on its path there. So so much
Luca
synergy
Corrado
from
also. It's funny because I meet these incredible winemakers around, and Luca Corrado Vietti from the Vietti family. Now he has started his own domain. Such a sweet, amazing, very talented winemaker from Barolo. I didn't know this. I'm talking with him and he said, I worked with your father. I interned at Robert Mondavi. So it's fun how it's just such a very, like you were saying, Matthew, it's a very small world. And this cross-pollination of internships, I think, just make it ever better and ever more connected. And
yeah. And I think I might have heard this wrong, but I think there was an invitation somewhere in there where you were inviting me to
come on out. Harvest, we got you. We do have exceptionally fun harvest lunches. So yes.
I can imagine.
Which mimic some of the incredible harvest lunches I had at Domaine Dujac and the generosity of that family. The Sess family, Jacques and Rosalind and Alec and the whole family, Jeremy, such generous teachers during harvest, not just in terms of in the cellar and the vineyard, but also with just opening incredible wines and talking about the incredible history of wine that through their lens and their friends in the Rhone and Burgundy and in Bordeaux and Loire, et cetera. Incredible family.
Well, that makes my next question easy. Okay. So we'll get into the quick fire here. Okay. What was your best harvest meal ever then?
So it kind of is unfair. I think that for me, it would be some of those meals with my father and my grandfather. I was fortunate that I was able to, spend a long time with my grandfather. I was 28 years old before he went on to the great vineyard in the sky, as my father says. So some of those meals where we were able to open wines and talk about that vintage, this vintage, et cetera, are amazing.
Is there one that sticks out? A wine
Well,
or a
I was
food?
going to go back to Burgundy because one of the wrap-up harvest vintages at Domaine du Jacques, incredible wines. There was a bottle of 71 Dow Claire, which is Bruno Claire, I guess his father, 1971 Musigny out of Magnum, that was exceptional. That Jeremy got back from rugby that night, and Alec was the one who dipped in the cellar for that one. And Jeremy came back and kind of nailed it blindly, which was really cool. So yeah, the most memorable, I think, were just those moments. And it's not even a specific memory. It's just the warmth and curiosity that my grandfather had always about the vintage and about how things were going. And then my father kind of getting the questions and the banter back and forth, not banter, but the conversation, the deep curiosity between the two of them, and then the wines, and always something lovely, but more of a blur of many memories of harvest lunches with my father and my grandfather. Some back to Robert Mondavi at the Vineyard Room, which were very cool memories. But Dad, your turn.
Oh, well, I remember a fabulous lunch it was a dinner, Sunday evening dinner, that the Demptos family had picked this. My best buddy and I went to Europe in 1970, and we were roughing it badly. But then Louis Demptos found that we were there, scooped us up, brought us to this amazing meal. It was at his wife's family's home, and they were in the wine business. And Aubailly and Veronique Saunders is still a part of that family. She is still the general manager of that winery. But we had such an amazing luncheon there that showed me that 3 generations of family could still be together in a very positive way. And that was important to me. An amazing meal. But I would have to say the foundational chef for our family was my grandmother, Rosa. I say that my grandfather was a very smart man because he married a very smart woman, and she was a fabulous cook, very outgoing and very social. But it's the classic lady that would set an extra place in case anybody happened to come by, and was welcoming and just endlessly varied types of all Italian food.
What
But it
was
was
what
really
was
great.
Rosa Mondavi's signature dish? What was like the thing that you'd
Oh,
ask for?
her pasta was extraordinary, but anything she touched was fabulous. But her pasta was outstanding. And,
Homemade?
you know, homemade tomatoes from the garden. All the ingredients came basically from the garden except for the flour. And she would make her own pasta and sauce and uh, chicken, ham, whatever have you. But they were amazing meals. And so I think that Napa Valley owes its culinary identity, I think, to the Italian immigrants that came after Prohibition, uh, like my grandfather and my grandmother and the Martinis. There were so many families here, but all the best food was in people's homes. The
Yeah.
Santarellis, the
I'm
Santis.
I'm
Uh,
sending this I'm sending this clip to Thomas Keller right now as we speak
well,
to
I
let him
think
know.
that he would say that I was at a dinner that where he said he chose to come to Napa Valley because of what he saw my father doing in cultivating the great chefs program at Robert Mondavi. But what my father did was extend what my grandmother had done. My father would say that all the people that would come to Napa Valley while we were still at Charles Krug would make their way to Rosa's kitchen, and it was the epicenter. But it really was this culture of great food and great wine that the Italians brought in. And then Thomas came here because my father took that same idea, but nobody celebrated Italian food in a marketing way. They enjoyed it and expected it to be the best. But the best recognized food was French food. And
Right.
again, when Kennedy was in the White House, he had a French chef and French cuisine. The French knew how to market their food and market their wine in a way that Italians just took for granted. And, you have to focus, you have to market, you have to present. So now I think Thomas Keller took what was here and has brought it to a much higher level. So I don't want to take anything away from Thomas Keller because
Oh yeah.
he is kind of the epicenter. He took the French Laundry from Sally Schmidt, who was known for fabulous American cuisine, and he took it up in recognition to haute cuisine of France.
And
And
he's still friends with the Schmidt family, and
oh, sure,
what Thomas has done is absolutely incredible. And it's the
amazing.
land of butter and cream versus the oil. He is
That's it.
That's French cuisine, but I think Thomas has gone to this takes everything from he's kind
Asian
of
cuisine,
he's taken that French kind of concept and then brought the whole world of spice and flavor into.
And he's still teaching everybody. He's still teaching, and he's still doing such a great job, and has helped Napa Valley tremendously by elevating what he's done. But we all came from somewhere, so it is a continuation.
As you guys have helped Napa Valley and still teach, I'm going to leave you with 2 questions for you, Carlo, and then get you guys out of here and back to harvest. Carlo, if your grandfather, Robert Mondavi, walked into RAEN today, what would he say?
Oh my gosh. Well, that's a good question. First, my grandfather, we were incredibly tight. So he would want to probably taste everything, open all the wines, taste through them, go into details, go through the barrels. I think he would love the vision and direction that we've taken RAEN. I think he'd be incredibly impressed with the true Sonoma coast. There's this the dream of making wines, like I said, in the company of the best wines of the world. For him, that was focused in Napa Valley and with Bordeaux varieties in many ways, with Pinot Noir as well. But I think that he would say that we've found those Grand Cru sites that can sit in the company of the best wines of the world out on the coast. And I think that he would believe that we have found this area where we have, call it our Tokalon or our Sage Mountain Vineyard, but on the coast. So the Grand Cru sites on the coast, which,
I think Carlo, I think Robert would love it. And I think he would be very flattered. Carlo has called one of his wines, one of his most important wines, Royal St. Robert. And he would start in honor of his grandfather. And if you look at the neck label, at the top it has RGM, Heart and Soul. And because Dad would always tell all of us and his grandchildren especially, he said, no matter what you do, if you're gonna be a ditch digger, do it with your whole heart and soul. Just be the best damn ditch digger you can be, and just go after it. And Carlo took that to heart and has it on the neck label where the vintage is for RAEN, but it's RGM, Heart and Soul. And Carlo embodies that. He has his grandfather's energy and charisma. I know that Dad would be extremely proud of Carlo and all of his grandchildren, actually.
Thanks, Dad.
Well, I am sure he would be. And I am so thankful for both of your time here. I'm looking at the wine director, Mr. Troy Revel of the Farrington here, and he's saying, I got to go do my cellar work, which means I got to get out of here. But I could talk to you guys, and we'll have to have you back on to really dive deep into some of those wine things you were talking about and get even more into your specific winemaking and the method to your madness. In the time being, come to the dinner here at Farrington on September 25th. Get yourself some Continuum, get yourself some RAEN, spelled RAEN, and you will drink deliciously.